But the main form of brainwashing that I see as a constant in every situation is to convince this person that you love them so much that you'll allow them to do whatever it takes to provide to the team, to be an asset. They will give you permission. They love you so much, but they want you to boss up and to be independent and to bring something to the table. So they're gonna let you go and make the decision yourself to sell your body, to put a price tag on who you are.
She left on her own 2 feet. Nobody grabbed her and threw her in a van. She was so brainwashed and so committed to what this life looked like in her mind that she on her own 2 feet walked right out our door, and I could not do anything about it.
Did you know that right now, 79,000 children are being sex trafficked in the state of Texas alone? What are the 6 stages of grooming that predators use to brainwash children and young adults to pull them into sex trafficking? And how is it even possible that this happens in today's suburban schools in America? This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jekielek. Today, our guest host, Epoch Times senior reporter Charlotte Cuthbertson, sits down with Kelly Litvak, whose daughter was trafficked. In response, she founded Childproof America, which provides education about sex trafficking and support to families affected by it. Part 2 of this special episode will premiere Friday, November 22nd. Charlotte will sit down with Kelly's daughter, Courtney Litvak, to hear her exclusive first-hand account of surviving the horrors of sex trafficking and building a new life afterwards.
Kelly, thank you so much. Welcome to American Thought Leaders.
Thank you.
Now, we're on a pretty tough topic today, sex trafficking. You talked earlier about a statistic that really hit me. In Texas,
Yes.
there are 79,000 children being sex trafficked
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
That seems huge, but you're saying it's probably quite a low number.
Yes. So the data shows us that we do have 79,000 reported cases of child sex trafficking in Texas. But keep in mind that's reported cases. So I suspect that it is probably double that amount. So we are definitely in the midst of an epidemic, and with Houston being a hub for child sex trafficking, we definitely have a very serious issue, and I would expect that number may even exceed 200,000 in Texas.
And Texas isn't even the worst state.
Right, there is one ahead of us, and that would be California. So we are number 2, but we are definitely right up there with California as well.
You talked a little bit earlier about how organized this industry was and how it's just everywhere around us in every community. It's in nice communities too. Can you explain a little bit about that for us?
Yes. So as far as the crime and the devastation of sex trafficking, it is definitely not just individuals per se that are pursuing juveniles in schools or in churches or in communities. It is typically a very organized network where there's a hierarchy of power, all the way from a spotter to a recruiter and a groomer, all the way to the actual pimp. So everybody within that hierarchy has a different role, and they are very, very masterful at what role they play. And most people, like myself several years ago, thought that this was an international crime, that this was not in the United States. But the reality is, it's not just in the United States, it's in our suburban communities. So we as parents and as leaders and educators and law enforcement, we all need to be very just realistic about what this looks like. We need to remove any stereotypes about who, what, where, when, and why, and we need to be very much educated, because this is absolutely in our schools, in our churches, in our coffee houses, and most definitely on social media.
you became obviously an unwilling expert about sex trafficking because it was right in your home. Can you
Yes.
explain how it hit your family?
Yes. So even though my background is juvenile justice, and in fact I authored a book for teenagers, nothing in my previous work experience had anything to do with human trafficking. So it was definitely not something that was on my radar, and certainly not something that I would ever have thought would have infiltrated my own family. But in 2016, we started to notice some pretty drastic changes in our daughter's behavior. And while I've worked with hundreds of at-risk youth, my own child, I could not figure out exactly what was going on. And so the behaviors were so extreme that I had to question, is this just normal teenage behavior? Is this rebellion? Is this hormonal? All those things that parents kind of go through that checklist. But unfortunately, it wasn't the normal teenage growing up and phases and emotions. It was indeed human trafficking that had latched onto my daughter and changed our family forever.
I know with the organization that you founded, because of your experience, Childproof America, you lay out the 6 stages of grooming. Could you maybe sort of take us through those stages, because they seem very subtle, and I think that's part of the problem.
Yes. So it is so critical for parents to understand what the grooming stages are. Because if you understand the stages and you understand what behaviors present within each of those stages, you can really intervene effectively and redirect your child. But it's so difficult because those stages can take a year, can take 2 years. They're so slow because the predator that is grooming your child, they're so patient. And so much a part of that grooming process is about building trust. And you can't build trust with anybody overnight. So the trust and that bond is absolutely key. But the first stage of grooming is really quite ordinary. It's very normal. It is called befriend. So somebody comes into your life. It can be somebody in your church. It can be somebody in your school, in a safe environment that's so non-threatening, and really approach you like a teenager would. Hey, you know what? Like, I heard that you're going through a tough time. I mean, hey, we're all going out this weekend. Why don't you go? Well, of course, every teenager that's going through a vulnerable time wants to be accepted, right? So that approach of just a normal interaction and an invitation to hang out is so not threatening at all. So stage number 1 is just very, very non-threatening, but believe me, there's definitely a strategy behind that first contact. So even though the target is saying, wow, this person, I've seen him in the hall, I'm in class with them, it's very normal for maybe the target, but I can assure you it was definitely strategized and planned ahead of time before that first conversation. The second stage is the introduction of drugs and alcohol to get that target dependent on those chemicals. So perhaps your child is already experimenting. Phase 2 or stage 2 of grooming is the easy access to those. So drugs and alcohol are absolutely very much a part of the grooming. The next stage is when they began to isolate you from your parents. So maybe you had a close relationship with your child and all of a sudden you see your child withdraw. Well, that's normal. You're becoming a teenager. You don't want to hang out with your parents and tell them everything. So most parents will just say that's normal. But in reality, stage 3 is one of the most dangerous stages, because that is the separation emotionally from the parents or the caregivers and that target. And when that happens and you've lost emotional control, it is very difficult to get that child back on track. The next stage is when the trafficker or the groomer begins to separate you from your normal peer group. So say that you hung out with 5, 6, 7 peers all throughout your elementary years. And those kids most likely share the same value system as you. So it's important at that stage for the groomer to separate you from those kids that would hold you accountable. So the behavior that you're engaging in would be behaviors that that peer group would not endorse, support, or engage in themselves. So separating then that target from their normal peers and surrounding them with people who are in the mix of that whole grooming process is very key in that stage. The next stage is desensitize. Desensitizing that child is like the moral compass is just spinning. So when your child once would say, I would never put that kind of picture on social media. I would never smoke weed. I would never drink alcohol. Now all of a sudden it's normal. Their moral compass and all the values of which they were raised on is just completely gone haywire. And it's a brainwashing and a manipulation that's so masterful, it's hard to understand how anybody can get that kind of control over your child. And then the last stage is capitalize. And that is when your child is gone. And it's so important for parents to know that this is a long process. This is a long process. What put your child on the target in the first place is most likely vulnerability. So if your child is posting something on social media, oh, my parents and I are fighting all the time, or I broke up with a boyfriend, or one of my, a traumatic event, a friend passes away, a family member passes away, a divorce of the parents, some type of event that has set that child on a course of vulnerability, puts them on the radar, and that's where the whole process begins.
And you touched on it, but a lot of this happens online.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit? I know you said earlier that the smartphone is the worst invention,
yes.
But can you talk a little bit about what happens online?
I love social media myself. I love what a cell phone can provide for me, but I'm an adult and I have those coping skills and I have those life experiences to understand what is safe and what is not. But the reality is that a child gets their first smartphone on average at age 10. We are putting a very advanced piece of technology in their hands where unfortunately opens up the door to predators. There are so many hours that our kids spend online on screen time, anywhere from 6 to 9 hours a day. So the predators know to go where the kids are. And many times those kids are unsupervised on their social media. But what these apps have provided is a complete direct access from predator to child. And children who are 12, 13, 14 absolutely cannot outsmart and outplay a predator. So there are apps out there that are anonymous apps. Anybody can reach out to you and gain access and start talking to you without ever identifying or registering their name on a social media account or an app. Our gaming systems, Discord, Minecraft, our kids are in there playing and we're thinking, okay, they're under my roof and they're safe. But the reality is those have chat rooms where predators can get access and start those conversations. So anything with a screen and anything that allows access to your child is absolutely 100% a risk.
And what are some of these apps that you talked about? Because they're not just sort of strange apps that people haven't heard of. These are very mainstream apps, aren't they?
So yes, and so I believe that two of the most popular apps and also the most predatory apps are Snapchat and Instagram. I would say probably 95% of teenagers have both of those on their cell phones right now. So Snapchat has My Eyes Only, which is a hidden app behind the main Snapchat. And then Instagram is just, you can direct message through there. We also have Kik, which is a hugely, widely popular app with about 100 million users right now. So that app is an anonymous app where people can actually access you and have conversations with you without any kind of registration. So while we, love the technology that our cell phones provide, unfortunately, the predators have caught on to ways that they can reach your child. And I would say, Charlotte, that the majority of calls that I get through Childproof America from concerned parents, they're calling because their child is being pursued online. So that is a very, very high pathway, and parents are scared to death. But here's the thing, you can take your child's cell phone, but if your child is already in stage 3 or 4 of that grooming process, I can assure you they're going to find another way to make contact with that groomer. So taking your child's cell phone, locking it up, turning off your Wi-Fi, locking up all laptops, that will absolutely not stop that communication.
It's scary. Tell us a little bit about your experience, what you went through when your daughter went through that process. Yes. and then just disappeared.
So we were absolutely, completely just like the floor fell out from beneath us when we really understood exactly the situation that our daughter was in. And by the time we found out to the level of danger, it was too late. She was absolutely already on stage 4 of grooming, going into stage 5. So as parents, I can tell you, we were completely ill-equipped to understand how to navigate this devastation. And we were grasping, we were talking to everybody we could talk to, and we were up against the clock because our daughter was going to be soon turn 18. And in the state of Texas, she would be an adult, and it would be so much harder to have any kind of parental control over her, and also law enforcement. So we had to make major moves. We withdrew her from school, we sent her out of state, we were told to get her out of the environment, but unfortunately, we brought her back to her hometown, and within the first 24 hours, contact was reestablished. So right when she turned 18, days later she left. She left on her own 2 feet. Nobody grabbed her and threw her in a van. She was so brainwashed and so committed to what this life looked like in her mind that she on her own 2 feet walked right out our door, and I could not do anything about it. And there began a complete disaster, a parent's worst nightmare. We had been handling what was going on pretty privately up until that point, but unfortunately our story hit social media and it was a firestorm. It made international news. Why is that? I believe, personally, it's because people were stunned that something like this would happen to an all-American family. All of a sudden, people were like, wait a minute, this family, like they live in a nice community, in a good school district, with a child who is a varsity athlete, and this doesn't even make any sense. So I believe all eyes were on our story because people were absolutely in shock more than anything. And from there, everybody reached out to us. People we hadn't talked to in 10 years were at our front door. We were financially exploited with promises of rescuing our daughter. Every nonprofit in Texas and beyond reached out to us to say, we provide this service and we can do this. And we, as a parent, when you're in that state of just utter fear, you can't even add 1 + 1. So to try to navigate this enormous amount of information and try to understand what is the best pathway to bring your child out safely, I'm just telling you, it's not even possible. So that first 40 days, it was so overwhelming, it was so painful, it was so scary, it was so devastating, it was every emotion you can imagine as a parent. And while people were well-meaning for the most part and trying to offer help, everybody else was almost as clueless as us. You know, people that cared about us, they wanted so much to help, and they were like, well, do this and try this. And we were literally spinning in a circle, just grabbing at everything and anything, which I believe even further drove our daughter into that world.
It's even in the schools though now, this whole grooming process, the spotters and the people that look for vulnerable children, they're actually in school with these children.
Yes, yes.
How prevalent is that? Is your story just an anomaly, the all-American family, or Or is this really such a big danger?
This is picking up such traction, and it is 100% in the schools. We are in a 911 mode right now in this country to get education in those schools, because the teachers, the counselors, the nurses that are coming into contact with our children on a day-to-day basis, right now they're not equipped to recognize that. So we must get every school district in the state of Texas and across the country trained in this crime. So in our case, it did begin in our daughter's upscale high school. And while my husband and I were monitoring every move she made, the one place that we did not have access was at the school. And I even horrified my daughter by saying, I think I'm going to need to go to school with you. It was so alarming, the behavior, that I felt like I could not leave her side. I felt that her behaviors were so risky that we could literally lose her life. And so while I did consider going to her school, I knew that it would push her further away from us and embarrass her and humiliate her, so I chose to not do that. And unfortunately, that's where the traffickers got access. And in fact, they were able to come on campus and take her off campus during school hours, and her teachers marked her present. And so we were and are signed up to receive automated alerts if one of our kids, and I have a son as well, are not in their class. And it's all automated, and we are to receive a text message and a phone call, your child missed, period number 1, 2, and 3, period 3, 4, and 5. But we were not given that information, and therefore a very, very dangerous person was able to come on campus and remove my daughter from campus. So with all that experience, it even further solidifies my commitment to get these schools educated, trained, empowered, because that should have never happened to our daughter. That is unacceptable, and it's very dangerous, and we need to correct that now.
And you've really taken your experience and turned it into something pretty amazing with Childproof America to help families through that time where you were just completely helpless and didn't know where to turn. So tell us a little bit about how Childproof America came about.
Yes, so in those first 40 days when our child was missing, although she was on social media and claiming to be safe, so it's kind of like a gray area of missing, but we didn't know her location, and she was moving and she was claiming to be safe. We found out later that that was all scripted by the people that she was with. During this first 40 days when we just were completely just all over the place with just really not having any idea of what path to take, and we failed. We failed at bringing our daughter home. And when I was able to think through enough to get online and look for resources for parents, I Googled resources for parents of children that have been trafficked in Houston, and I came up with nothing. So I expanded my search to reach Texas. And I was so shocked that there was nothing in Texas. So I expanded to the United States, and there was nothing in the United States specifically for parents to come alongside them and provide that point person who can help them navigate social media, law enforcement, schools, all those different things. There was nothing. And that is where Childproof America came from. It was meeting a need that was non-existent, and it was meeting a need that was critical. Because during that time, I would have given anything. I just wanted one person to tell me what to do. But instead, I had 20 different people every day telling me 20 different things. So when you're in a crisis situation and your child's life is at risk, you don't have time to read reviews. You don't have time to hear 20 opinions. You want to know exactly what you need to do on this day, on the day tomorrow. What are the best resources? So our Family Guides program will come alongside families in crisis and provide 90 days of support. And we say 90 days because our volunteers will need to have some kind of cap on that, because unfortunately some kids never return. And so we can't ask, a volunteer to come alongside a family indefinitely. So it's a very structured program that we provide not only the resources that we know you're going to need, but the best resources. So we've done the vetting. We know local, we know state, and we know federal resources. So we literally hand that to the parent, and we provide that touch person every single day, because law enforcement doesn't have time to talk to 50 families every single day. So we want to be efficient with our time, we want to be streamlining our information, and we want to support that family during that time to get that child safely out of that situation and then on to next steps, which most likely is going to be trauma-informed counseling and perhaps long-term residential care.
It seems like a really critical issue, not many resources, kind of hopeless in a way. What can people do? What can parents do? What can the public do? Is it all possible to turn this around?
Well, I will say that in the state of Texas, wow, we've got some great political leaders, Governor Abbott being one of them. I believe that we do have a lot of resources, but I believe that some of those resources are repetitive. So we need to step back and we need to look at where are the gaps. We need to fill those gaps. But this is not a lost cause. There's always hope. But I will tell you that in Texas, and I believe throughout the country, we're working in a place of being reactive. We are chasing this crime right now. We need to move to a position of being proactive, but that is going to take strategy, partnerships, collaboration on all fronts. That's going to be the key. But until we get out of that reactionary state, we're going to continue to see kids fall through the cracks, and that is not acceptable. But I can tell you that the conversations are starting, legislation is passing, and moves are being made to make us a more of a proactive state as well as a proactive country.
Can you describe a little bit about knowing what Courtney went through and then seeing her today, what that's like for you as her mother?
I get emotional with that question because, the outcome was always a huge question mark for us. And to wake up for months on end and not even know if your child was still on the earth, I can't even, there is no words to describe that anguish. But I can also tell you that Childproof America kept me moving forward. If I didn't do anything to do something positive from this, I don't know where I would be today. This organization probably saved my life. But we instilled those values in our daughter when she was a little girl, and train up a child the way that he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from that. And so we always held on to hope that everything that we invest in, the seeds we planted, and the love we gave, and the time we gave, that would bear fruit when she needed it the most. And so we are so grateful, so incredibly grateful for our outcome, and that we have a daughter who she is amazing. And I do believe that God does not put us in a path to hurt us, but God equips us for the calling and the purpose of our life. And I believe that our daughter was chosen to shine a light on this devastating crime. And we will support her, we will encourage her, and we will always honor her journey. But most definitely, I have friends, I have acquaintances who lost their children to this crime. Lost them off this earth. And because we still have our daughter, I will continue to fight. I am so grateful that we have a chance, we have our daughter with us, to do something really big from our story that was so devastating.
And what are the next steps for you both?
We are both extremely passionate about speaking on a national level. We want to cast our net wide. We want to share our story, but this is very important for people to know. This is so critical. We are not here to entice fear. We are not here to scare parents and grandparents and caregivers to think that their child is going to be groomed tomorrow. Fear is not the way that we want to live. What we want to do is we want to strike the spirit of empowerment. If parents do not understand what this crime looks like, you are so vulnerable. So we are here to empower. We are not here to create fear. And we're here to share our education and our knowledge and our experiences on a global level. So we're not here to just, talk in Texas, which we love Texas and it's our home state. We are here to reach every single household, every single family. We don't want any family to ever say, not my kid. And we don't want any family to ever say, what's trafficking? That's not acceptable. This is in your child's classroom, potentially. This is on your child's cell phone. This is in your church. Anybody to say that they don't understand what this is, it puts that child at risk.
It would be great to understand from your experience. You must have tried to look at the demand side and the root of this. What is causing this? Gosh. And it's only getting worse by the looks of things.
Yes. My personal opinion about the root cause of this is pornography and children accessing that with the click of a cell phone switch. Mostly at around age 8 years old. So you are putting these images and ideas and this spirit of just sexuality in the mind of an 8-year-old child. And then that child grows up and his whole or her whole sexuality and the way she looks at love and relationships, it is absolutely warped. And then that feeds into becoming a buyer, becoming a seller, becoming a trafficker. But it starts, I believe, when people are very young. I believe also another root cause is fatherless homes. I believe that the people who are exploiting these vulnerable kids and young adults, they themselves are detached. They themselves perhaps were not raised in a household where they saw a father respecting his wife. They saw a man being a loving, caring, supportive father. So I believe that there's several root causes to this crime. And I believe that those are the main roots. It's the accessibility of pornography at a very young age. And it's definitely on the trafficker side, that detachment emotionally to the point where they can exploit, hurt, brutalize, and torture a vulnerable individual, whether it's a child or whether it's an adult. These individuals who are exploiting these people for money are evil walking among us. And they can be men, women, black, white. They come in all shapes and sizes. So we need to remove any kind of stereotype of what we believe a trafficker looks like, because most traffickers that kids and young adults are exposed to first are female.
Well, Kelly, that's everything that I had, but is there something that's important that we've missed or that you think that people really need to understand about this issue?
I do believe that we need to be completely realistic about the crime of today, because there was drug trafficking, gun trafficking, all of those things, but human trafficking has taken the lead in organized crime. And that is because you sell a drug, you sell a weapon, and it's gone. But when you re-exploit a victim over and over, it's a constant flow of income. And it's a $150 billion global industry. It's big money. And whenever there's money, whenever there's demand, there will be supply. And that supply could be your child.
And you're gonna love this person. This is gonna be somebody you idolize and you look up to. You will fall in love with the idea that they are selling you. You are in a state of denial this whole time, and it is so messed up to the point of people would rather discredit what I am telling you now because they don't want somebody to speak on this. They don't want the cycle to be disrupted. If you can't brainwash a person and gain control over them, then that's going to disrupt the whole cycle of sex trafficking.